Hi, I'm Lina. Welcome to Lina's Storybook, where we share the most unforgettable audio novels. Let's get started.
The third year my daughter went missing, Felix gave up. He told me that fate had run its course, that we couldn't be selfish, and that we needed to move on with our lives. But later, when his first love vanished, his hair turned white overnight, and he spent 50 agonizing years searching for her. Reborn into a new life, I made sure to save my daughter first and immediately filed for divorce. What I didn't expect was that Felix had been reborn too. On his first night back, he booked a flight to take his first love on a romantic getaway, only remembering he had a daughter 6 months later. When he finally showed up with a cheap airport teddy bear to pick her up from school, she pushed him away without hesitation and ran into another man's arms. "I'm sorry," she said. "I already have a new daddy." The news of Clara's disappearance arrived on a Tuesday, right in the middle of the most explosive argument Felix and I had ever had. He gripped my shoulders, his fingers digging into my skin, his voice a deafening roar echoing off the high ceilings of our Manhattan penthouse. "Lily has been gone for 3 years. Serena, 3 years. We've hired private investigators. We've exhausted the NYPD. We've done everything humanly possible. But we are still alive. We have to keep living. Can't you just look forward?" I raised my hand and slapped him hard across the face. The sharp crack silenced the room, leaving my palm stinging, and my heart entirely frozen. "We are Lily's parents, Felix," I whispered, my voice trembling with a chilling desperation. "If even we stop looking for her, she truly will never come home." Lily, our beautiful bright-eyed daughter. When she was 5, our AU pair, Maria, had taken her to Central Park to enjoy the afternoon sun. In the blink of an eye, while Maria was distracted by a phone call, Lily vanished. Terrified of losing her visa and her job, Maria delayed calling the police, costing us the most critical golden window to save our little girl. Felix and I had spent millions, followed every agonizing lead, but she was gone, as if the earth had simply swallowed her whole. Now, on the third anniversary of her disappearance, Felix was standing in our living room, telling me he wanted to stop. He wanted to move on, to focus on US. And perhaps sickeningly, to have another child. His cold, calculating detachment made him look like a stranger. Lily was a piece of my soul. Giving up on her felt like carving out my own heart with a rusted knife. I couldn't do it. I would never do it. Our argument shattered whatever fragile piece was left in our marriage. Every vase, every picture frame in the living room had been smashed to pieces in my hysterical grief. I had screamed until my throat bled, while he just stood there, looking at me with the cold, detached pity one reserves for a madwoman on the street. "You're being completely selfish, Serena," he sneered, his initial guilt morphing into raw impatience. "Are you going to destroy our entire home for a child we can never get back?" With that, he turned on his heel, walked into the master bedroom and locked the door. I collapsed onto the ruined sofa, clutching my phone, staring at Lily's smiling face on the screen, my tears soaking the expensive upholstery. Then, a notification popped up in our old high school alumni group chat. Clara had gone missing. Clara, the brilliant ethereal girl who had transferred to our prep school senior year, instantly capturing the hearts of every boy in our class, most notably, Felix's. I had barely processed the text message when the locked bedroom door suddenly burst open. Felix rushed out, his face pale as a sheet, his hands trembling violently, as he frantically dialed his phone over and over. "Clara, please pick up, please don't let anything happen to you," he muttered, his voice cracking with a raw, unfiltered terror I had never seen before. Felix was a Wall Street titan, a man known for his icy composure. Even when Lily was abducted, he had remained stoic, organizing search parties with mechanical efficiency. But now his hands were shaking, because to Felix, Clara was the untouchable white moonlight of his youth. I had loved Felix since we were children. Our families were East Coast old money, perfectly matched in status and wealth. I thought my devotion was enough, even after Clara rejected him to study art in Paris, leaving his heart broken. I had stayed by his side, year after year, until he finally proposed. I thought we had built a beautiful life, but watching him lose his mind over Clara, his hair literally turning white over the next few months of agonizing searching. I realized the horrifying truth. When Lily was lost, he kept his composure because she was a child born to a woman he didn't truly love. He spent the rest of his life searching for Clara. I spent mine searching for Lily. We died in separate hospital beds, elderly and estranged. As the monitors beeped their final countdown, I looked at his bedside table, where Clara's faded photo sat. If there is a next life, I thought, the bitterness tasting like ash in my mouth. I pray my daughter never has you as a father. Because he didn't deserve her. I gasped for air, bolting upright in bed, my chest heaved. Sweat clinging to my forehead. The smell of hospital antiseptic was gone, replaced by the expensive lavender and cedarwood scent of our suburban Connecticut estate. I was alive. And looking at the date on my phone, I realized with a heart-stopping jolt that I had been reborn. It was the exact day 5 years ago that Lily was taken. I didn't think. I threw off the silk sheets, ignored my slippers, and bolted out the door. I ran through the manicured lawns like a madwoman, my lungs burning, sprinting toward the private community park, where Maria always took Lily. Please God, please let me be in time. I prayed with every agonizing step. I saw them. Maria was looking down at her phone, laughing, and a few yards away, a man in a dark baseball cap was crouching down, offering Lily a piece of candy, his hand reaching for her small arm. Get away from her, I screamed, a primal, earth-shattering sound that tore through the quiet neighborhood. I tackled the man just as his fingers brushed her sleeve, wrapping my arms protectively around my terrified daughter. I screamed for Maria to call 911 immediately. The commotion drew the attention of the neighborhood security, and a dozen affluent neighbors, who, terrified for their own children, helped pin the trafficker down until the police arrived. Holding Lily in my trembling arms, feeling her warm, racing heartbeat against my chest, I wept uncontrollably. She was safe. My baby was safe. While waiting to give my statement to the police, I glanced back toward our estate. My breath hitched. Felix was sprinting out the front doors, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, looking frantic. Wait! It was Tuesday afternoon. Felix was supposed to be exhausted from a red-eye flight from Tokyo, sleeping in the master bedroom until evening. He shouldn't be awake, let alone running out with luggage, unless he had been reborn too. If Felix had memories of our past life, if he knew the sheer agony of Lily being kidnapped today, his first instinct should have been to tear the house apart looking for her. He should have rushed to the park to save his flesh and blood. Instead, he was throwing his bag into his Porsche and speeding away without a second glance toward the park. I watched his taillights disappear down the tree-lined avenue, a cold, hollow realization settling in my bones. He knew, and he still didn't care. I didn't have time to dwell on his betrayal. The police needed my statement. I held Lily tightly, completing the grueling paperwork, ensuring the monster who tried to take her was locked away for good. By the time we finally returned home, the sun had set, casting long dark shadows across the empty mansion. Where is Daddy? Lily asked, her small hand clutching mine. She loved Felix so much. She used to run to him, hugging his legs and calling him her superhero. I looked at the empty hallway. Felix hadn't returned. He hadn't even called. Lily's face fell, but she was always so desperately eager to please. She forced a bright smile. Daddy must be working really hard at the office. If I don't finish my reading homework, he'll be upset. She scampered to the living room, opening her copy of The Velveteen Rabbit, trying to be the perfect daughter for a man who wasn't even there. Watching her, the lingering regrets of my past life solidified into a diamond-hard resolve. I refused to let my daughter waste her love on a man who viewed her as collateral damage. Divorce was no longer just an option. It was my only path forward. That night, I sat by Lily's bed until she fell into a deep, peaceful sleep, her small chest rising and falling rhythmically. I pulled the blanket up to her chin, kissed her forehead, and quietly stepped out onto the balcony. The cool night air did little to soothe the burning anger in my chest. I pulled out my phone and dialed Felix's number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried his executive assistant. Nothing. He had completely vanished off the grid. Did a bad man take Daddy too? Lily had asked earlier. Her big perceptive eyes filled with unshed tears. I had lied, telling her he was on an important business trip, and would definitely be back for her 6th birthday this weekend, but I knew the truth. I opened Instagram. Clara's profile was usually a curated feed of Parisian cafes and abstract art. Tonight, she had posted a new photo. It was a picture of two hands intertwined on a white linen tablecloth. The azure blue of the Aegean Sea stretching out in the background. The geotag read, Santorini, Greece. The caption was short but nauseatingly clear. After all these years of circling each other, I finally have your confession. Worth the wait. I zoomed in on the photo. The man's right index finger had a distinct, jagged white scar, a souvenir from a fencing match Felix had been in during college. I knew that scar better than I knew the lines on my own palms. The comment section was flooded with congratulations from our old prep school classmates, oblivious to the fact that the man in the photo was a married father, whose daughter had nearly been abducted earlier, that very same day. Santorini. It was the place Felix had promised to take me for our honeymoon. He had said he was too busy with the merger, that we would go next year. Then I got pregnant, and there was always another excuse. A board meeting, a market crash, a sudden acquisition. I had waited a lifetime for a promise he never intended to keep. But the moment he woke up in his second life, realizing Clara was alive and well, he had abandoned his company, his wife, and his traumatized daughter, hopping on a private jet to fulfill a teenage fantasy. I didn't cry. I think I had exhausted all my tears in the previous life. The hysterical, desperate woman who had smashed vases in this very living room was dead. In her place was a mother who was coldly, methodically planning her exit. I took screenshots of the post, the location data, and the comments. I backed them up on a secure cloud server. If he wanted to play the romantic hero for his white moonlight, he could do it with a significantly reduced bank account. I was going to fight for sole custody, and I was going to make sure Lily and I walked away with exactly what we deserved. The next morning, I instructed my lawyers to draft the divorce papers. Since Felix was sunbathing in Greece and had turned off his phone, I couldn't serve him yet. Instead, I packed a weekend bag for Lily and drove out to the Hamptons to see my parents. The Vanderbilt-esque estate was as imposing and cold as the people who lived in it. When I sat in my father's mahogany-paneled study and placed the printed screenshots of Felix's infidelity on the desk, expecting parental outrage, I was met with deafening silence. My mother, draped in cashmere, took a sip of her Earl Grey tea. She looked at the photos, then looked at me with a sigh of mild inconvenience. "Serena, darling, we are people of status," she began, her voice perfectly modulated. "Sometimes, a wife simply has to turn a blind eye to these indiscretions. The market responds well to your marriage. The upcoming merger with Felix's firm is too delicate. Think of Lily. You shouldn't be so selfish as to break up her home over a momentary lapse in judgment." I stared at the woman who had given birth to me, feeling a sickening sense of déjà vu. Selfish. That was the word they all used when I demanded basic human decency. "No, mother," I said, standing up, my voice steady but laced with ice. "Staying in a toxic, loveless marriage for the sake of corporate optics is what is truly selfish and irresponsible. My life is not a PR campaign, and I will not teach my daughter that a woman must swallow her dignity to keep a man who doesn't respect her." My father slammed his fist on the desk, his face turning purple. "If you walk out that door and file those papers, Serena, do not expect to come crying back to this family. You will be cut off." "Consider it done," I replied. "I'd rather be orphaned than complicit." I walked out, grabbed Lily's hand, and drove away from the sprawling estate. About halfway down the coastal highway, the adrenaline faded, leaving behind a crushing weight of exhaustion. I pulled my Range Rover over to a secluded scenic overlook, gripped the steering wheel, and finally broke down. The tears came in violent, jagged sobs. I was divorcing my husband, excommunicated from my family, and entirely alone. Lily, sitting in the back, quietly unbuckled her car seat. She climbed into the front, not saying a word. She just wrapped her small arms around my neck, patting my back gently. She pulled a tissue from the console and clumsily wiped my cheeks. "Don't cry, Mommy," she whispered, her sweet voice breaking my heart all over again. "Lily is here. Lily will always be here." I looked at her tear-streaked face. "If Mommy and Daddy don't live together anymore, and you stay with me, would you be okay?" Lily tilted her head, her brow furrowed in deep thought. "Will leaving Daddy make you stop crying?" she asked softly. I nodded, a choked sob escaping my throat. Lily gave me a bright missing tooth smile. "I want Mommy to be happy. If Daddy makes you cry, he is a bad guy. I don't want a bad guy daddy anyway." I hugged her tight, crying harder, but this time out of profound gratitude. Lily started crying too, overwhelmed by the emotion. But suddenly, a sharp excruciating pain shot through my chest. My vision blurred, black spots dancing in my peripheral vision. I had a congenital heart condition. Tachycardia triggered by extreme emotional distress. The pain was agonizing. I slumped against the steering wheel, gasping for breath. Through the fading light of my consciousness, I saw Lily panicking, her tiny hands fumbling with my phone, pressing the speed dial for Felix. "Daddy, please. Mommy is hurt," she cried into the receiver. But as the darkness swallowed me, I heard the automated voice echoing from the speaker. "The number you have reached is unavailable." The rhythmic, steady beeping of a heart monitor was the first thing that registered in my mind. I slowly opened my eyes, wincing at the harsh fluorescent lights of the private hospital room at New York Presbyterian. For a split second, my brain was foggy. Then the memory of the coastal highway and the crushing chest pain flooded back. "Lily," I gasped, trying to sit up, the IV line pulling taut against the back of my hand. The fear of losing her all over again gripped my throat like a vice. "Mommy." A small weight launched onto the edge of my bed. Lily's tear-stained face hovered over mine, her eyes wide with relief. I pulled her into my arms, burying my face in her soft hair, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo. "I'm here, baby. Mommy's okay." I soothed, my voice raspy. I looked at her carefully. "Who brought us to the hospital, sweetie?" Lily counted on her fingers, her brow furrowed in concentration. "A really, really handsome uncle," she declared proudly. Just as the words left her mouth, the heavy wooden door of the VIP suite swung open. "You're finally awake, sleeping beauty," a deep warm voice teased. I turned toward the door, my eyes widening in absolute shock. Julian Vance. My childhood best friend. The boy who had practically grown up in my family's estate. If Felix was the cold, unapproachable ice prince of Wall Street, Julian was the sun-radiant, effortlessly charming, and fiercely protective of the people he cared about. We had been inseparable until high school, when my infatuation with Felix had driven a wedge between us. When Felix and I started dating, Julian had packed his bags, accepted an offer at Oxford, and moved to London to build his own venture capital empire. In my past life, Julian had never returned to New York. Or maybe he had, and I had been too drowning in the grief of losing Lily to ever notice. Seeing him now, leaning against the doorframe with a casual elegance in his tailored suit, felt like a hallucination. "The doctor said your heart condition flared up from severe emotional stress. You were lucky I was driving down that exact stretch of highway," Julian said, walking over and taking a seat on the leather sofa. He picked up an apple from the fruit basket and began peeling it with a silver pocket knife. He meticulously cut the apple into perfect bite-sized cubes, speared them with toothpicks, and handed a small plate to me, offering another to Lily. Lily took it with a bright smile. "Thank you, Uncle Julian." "How did you know Mommy only eats apples if they're cut into little squares?" Julian chuckled, tapping Lily on the nose playfully. He looked at me, his amber eyes dancing with a familiar nostalgic warmth, though there was a hint of underlying seriousness. "Because your mother has been utterly spoiled since she was 5 years old. If it's not cut perfectly, she'll just refuse to eat it." Lily shook her head, her expression turning somber. "But at home, Daddy never cuts fruit for Mommy. Mommy always cuts it and brings it to Daddy's office." The playful atmosphere in the room instantly evaporated. Julian's hand froze mid-air. He slowly set the knife down, his eyes locking onto mine. He didn't say a word, but his gaze was heavy, scrutinizing the tired lines on my face and the absence of my husband. "Stop staring at me like that, Julian. It is creepy," I muttered, suddenly feeling very self-conscious. I picked up a piece of apple and popped it into my mouth, avoiding his eyes. Without warning, Julian reached out and flicked my forehead. Hard. "Ouch, Julian. What the hell? I'm a heart patient," I complained, rubbing my brow. Despite the years of separation, the comfortable, exasperating dynamic between us snapped right back into place. I had always been slightly unreasonable with him, and he had always let me get away with it. Julian just smirked, offering me another piece of apple. "Calm down, patient. Eat your fruit." He stood up, adjusting his cuffs. "I'm going to go talk to your cardiologist." As he walked out the door, he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear, "I hate seeing you diminish yourself. If only a flick to the head could cure you of your terrible taste in men." The doctors cleared me for discharge the next afternoon. My physical health was fine, but my living situation was not. I refused to return to the cold, empty penthouse that belonged to Felix. That place was a mausoleum of broken promises. Fortunately, my personal trust fund was untouched by my family's threats. I owned several properties across the city. I showed Lily a few options, and she picked a beautiful sunlit brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, complete with a small garden in the back. The moment Julian found out I was moving and filing for divorce, he essentially took over. Within 24 hours, he had coordinated a fleet of movers, transferred our essential belongings, and hired a team to clean and organize the new brownstone. Coincidentally, the new house was only 3 blocks away from Julian's New York residence. "Do you really like Uncle Julian that much?" I asked Lily one evening, wrapping her in a fluffy towel after her bath. Over the past week, Julian had practically moved in. He showed up every morning with fresh coffee and pastries, picked Lily up from kindergarten, and spent hours in the backyard building a miniature greenhouse with her. They acted like they had known each other for years. I was beginning to feel like a third wheel in my own home. Lily nodded enthusiastically, throwing her arms around my neck. "Uncle Julian is the best. He actually plays with me. He listens when I talk. Daddy always said he was too busy. He was always on his phone. Yesterday, Uncle Julian even helped me fix my bicycle. I wish Uncle Julian was my daddy." Her words felt like a physical blow, a mix of profound sadness for the father she deserved, and a fierce gratitude for the man who was stepping up. Children are incredibly perceptive. They might not understand the complexities of adult relationships, but they know exactly who makes them feel safe and loved. Felix's negligent, distracted parenting paled in comparison to Julian's deliberate, warm presence. I hugged her tightly, resting my chin on top of her head. Felix had lost the right to this child the moment he boarded that plane to Greece. A few weeks later, Lily came home from kindergarten, dragging her feet, her usual bright demeanor replaced by a heavy pout. During dinner, she just pushed her peas around her plate. "What is wrong, sweetheart?" I asked, putting my fork down. She sniffled, looking up with big watery eyes. "We have an annual father-daughter field day next Monday. There are 3-legged races and building projects, but Daddy isn't here." My heart sank. "It is okay, baby. Mommy can do all those things with you. I can run really fast." Lily shook her head, a tear escaping down her cheek. Before I could comfort her further, the doorbell rang. It was Julian, arriving right on cue for his daily mooching of my cooking. Lily's face instantly lit up. "Uncle Julian." She scrambled off her chair and ran to the door, launching herself into his arms. Julian caught her easily, spinning her around. "There is my favorite girl," he laughed, walking into the dining room. I gave him a mock glare. "I went through 24 hours of labor to birth this child, and she likes you more than me. It is like I had her just for you." Julian's eyes flashed with a sudden intense warmth. He looked at me, a lazy smile spreading across his face. "I wouldn't mind that arrangement at all. I promise I'd raise her perfectly." I quickly snatched Lily from his arms, my cheeks suddenly feeling very warm. "In your dreams, she is my baby," Lily giggled, patting my cheek. "Don't fight. I love you both. You can be Mommy, and Uncle Julian can be my new daddy." She looked at Julian with sudden hope. Uncle Julian, can you be my dad for the field day? Everyone else will have their dads there. I don't want the other kids to laugh at me for being the girl whose daddy doesn't want her. The rawness of her insecurity shattered any hesitation I had. Julian didn't even miss a beat. Felix is currently playing hide and seek in Europe. I would be honored to be your dad for the day. Lily, we're going to win every single trophy. And so on Monday morning, Julian and I walked into the kindergarten gymnasium, holding Lily's hands. The day was filled with chaotic games, potato sack races, and a trivia contest to test the bond between the parents. The teacher, holding a microphone, asked the parents a series of rapid-fire questions. What is mommy's favorite color? Julian hit the buzzer. Lavender. Correct. What is mommy's favorite fruit? Apples, specifically cut into tiny, precise cubes. Correct. What does mommy hate the most? Being lied to. Correct. I stared at Julian in awe. He hadn't hesitated on a single answer. Finally, the teacher smiled and asked the last question. And finally, who is Daddy's absolute favorite person in the whole wide world? The other fathers immediately wrote down their daughters' names. It was the standard expected answer for a father-daughter event. I smiled, expecting Julian to say Lily. Julian grabbed the whiteboard marker and wrote a single word, holding it up for the crowd to see. Serena. I froze. I pointed at myself, utterly bewildered. Me, the teacher cooed into the microphone. Oh my goodness. Look at Lily's parents. They are so in love. He is the only father here who wrote his wife's name. My heart hammered against my ribs, loud and frantic. When the event ended, Julian walked up to me, handing me a bottle of water. He noticed my flushed face. Is the tachycardia acting up again? He asked, genuine concern in his eyes. No, I managed to say, taking a breath. Julian, why didn't you write Lily's name? Julian's smile faded into something incredibly serious. His amber eyes locking onto mine with a vulnerability I had never seen before. Because as Lily's stand-in father, my favorite person is Lily's mother. I didn't lie, Serena. I don't see anything wrong with my answer. Something shifted in the air between us. My heart started racing all over again, and this time, it had absolutely nothing to do with my medical condition. For the next 2 months, I seriously suspected Julian had forgotten he owned his own penthouse in Manhattan. He practically lived at my brownstone. While I appreciated his help, I was a woman on the verge of a highly publicized divorce. The tabloids would have a field day if they caught the heir to the Vance fortune playing house with Felix's estranged wife. I tried to establish boundaries. Julian, you need to keep some distance. I told him one evening while he was washing dishes in my kitchen. People will talk. He turned off the faucet, drying his hands slowly. Are you getting cold feet about the divorce, Serena? Are you playing hard to get with Felix? Because if you're planning on going back to that bastard, I'll walk out that door right now and lose all respect for you. You need to throw away garbage, not recycle it. I am not going back to him, I shot back, offended. I just think we need to be careful. He exhaled a long breath, a look of profound relief washing over his face. Good, as long as you're not hopelessly naive. I don't care what the tabloids say. He turned his back on me and walked upstairs to read Lily her bedtime story, leaving me speechless in the kitchen. In the 3rd month, Felix and Clara finally concluded their grand European romance and returned to New York. Fresh off the plane, a sudden wave of paternal guilt must have struck him. A lingering memory of his tragic past life. Perhaps, because the first thing Felix did upon landing was drive straight to Lily's elite private kindergarten. He and I collided right at the front gates. Felix looked tanned, healthy, and incredibly guilty. He was holding a cheap generic teddy bear that still had a JFK duty-free tag hanging off its ear. It was the exact type of toy Lily despised. When he saw me, he flinched, instinctively taking a step back. Serena, I had a sudden corporate crisis in Europe. It was an emergency acquisition. I had to leave immediately and didn't have time to call. I stared at him, my expression completely blank. He had spent 3 months parading his affair across social media, and he still thought I was the obedient, oblivious wife waiting for his crumbs of affection. Save it, I interrupted coldly, checking my watch. The bell is ringing. Lily is coming out. Felix shut his mouth, looking relieved that I hadn't pressed the issue. He straightened his tie and put on his best fatherly smile as the children began pouring out of the double doors. Lily skipped out, her face bright, but the moment she laid eyes on Felix, she stopped dead in her tracks. The joy vanished from her features, replaced by a cold defensive wall. Lily, sweetheart, look what Daddy brought you from his business trip. Felix approached, holding out the ugly bear. In the past, Lily would have taken it, forcing a smile to appease the father, whose love she was so desperate to earn. But she had spent the last 3 months with Julian, a man who taught her that she never had to shrink herself to fit someone else's comfort zone. A man who taught her that her voice mattered. Lily didn't take the bear. She looked at the duty-free tag, then looked Felix dead in the eye. I outgrew those stuffed animals a year ago, she said, her voice terrifyingly steady for a 6-year-old. And lying is a bad thing, Daddy. I saw Mommy's phone. You were at the beach. You weren't working. If you don't love Mommy and me anymore, that is fine, because I don't really need you either. I have a new daddy now. With that, she grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the street. I looked up and saw Julian leaning against his sleek black Aston Martin, waving at us with a grin. Daddy! Lily shouted, breaking into a sprint. She launched herself into Julian's arms, wrapping her legs around his waist and kissing his cheek loudly. Felix stood frozen on the sidewalk, his face draining of all color, the cheap airport bear dropping from his hands into the dirt. Julian, always knowing exactly how to turn the knife, carried Lily over to where Felix stood. He looked down at the discarded bear, then met Felix's horrified gaze, with a look of absolute dripping disdain. My daughter hates cheap polyester, Felix. Stop bringing trash near her. It's embarrassing for everyone. Serena, I demand an explanation right now. Felix stood in the center of my new living room, his face pale with a mixture of rage and disbelief. In his trembling hand, he held a framed photograph he had just snatched off my mantelpiece. It was a picture of Julian, Lily, and me at a campsite in the Adirondacks last weekend. Lily was sitting on Julian's shoulders, laughing hysterically, while I stood beside them, smiling brighter than I had in years. Lily had always begged Felix to go camping. He always dismissed it as too dirty, or a waste of billable hours. Yet, in Clara's meticulously curated Instagram feed, there was a photo of Felix setting up a luxury glamping tent for her in the Swiss Alps. When Lily accidentally saw that photo on my iPad, she hadn't said a word. She just went to her room, and the next morning her pillow was soaked with tears. When Julian found out, he canceled 3 board meetings, bought a ridiculously expensive SUV full of camping gear, and drove us to the mountains. He spent 2 hours figuring out how to build a fire just to roast the perfect marshmallow for Lily. Now, Felix was glaring at the photographic evidence of his own replacement. This is incredibly pathetic, Felix, I said, sipping my coffee leaning against the kitchen counter. I had no desire to scream, to cry, or to throw things like I did in my past life. The opposite of love wasn't hate. It was complete, utter apathy. Pathetic! Felix roared, his composure finally breaking. He hurled the framed photo to the hardwood floor. The glass shattered into 100 jagged pieces. It's been 3 months, and you're already playing house with another man in front of my daughter. Am I dead to you? The sound of shattering glass made Lily scream from her bedroom. I immediately put down my mug, marched past Felix, and went into her room. I picked up my trembling daughter, covered her ears, and carried her back out, shooting Felix a look of absolute venom. You might as well be dead, I said, my voice dangerously low. The last shred of my patience evaporated. I walked over to the console table, pulled out a thick manila envelope, and slammed it onto the coffee table right in front of him. Do you really think I'm stupid, Felix? Do you think I don't know exactly where you were for the last 90 days? You missed your daughter's birthday. You missed her kindergarten field day. You weren't there when I was hospitalized with a cardiac episode. While we needed you, You were busy recreating your pathetic teenage fantasies with Clara on the Aegean coast. Felix stumbled back a step, the color completely draining from his face as the photos spilled out of the envelope. Photos of his hand, his watch, the scar on his abdomen, all unmistakable proof of his affair, documented proudly by Clara herself. "No, Serena. Wait, it's not what you think," he stammered, his confident Wall Street persona crumbling into that of a panicked boy. She was going through a hard time. I just wanted to give her closure. I wanted to help her fulfill a dream. It didn't mean anything." "Save your breath for the judge," I cut him off, sliding the divorce agreement across the table. My signature was already elegantly scrawled at the bottom. "You are a fraud, Felix. Sign the papers and get out of my house." Felix fought the divorce initially. He tried the same tactics he used in corporate negotiations: delaying, pleading, and finally, gaslighting. "We've been together for 10 years, Serena. This isn't just about us. It is about the merger, our family's legacies. You can't just throw it all away because of a misunderstanding. Stop being so selfish." Hearing him call me selfish again, exactly like he did in the past life when I refused to stop looking for our kidnapped daughter, was the final nail in the coffin. "I am securing a safe, honest future for myself and my daughter," I replied coldly. "The only selfish person in this room is the man who wants a wife at home and a mistress abroad. Sign it, Felix, or I take these photos to the New York Times." Faced with public ruin and the irrefutable evidence of his infidelity, Felix's legal team advised him to surrender. He signed the papers. He was the at-fault party, and I ensured I walked away with primary custody of Lily and a highly favorable financial settlement. I wasn't being greedy. I was taking what was owed to secure my daughter's future. Stepping out of the Manhattan courthouse into the crisp autumn air, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't realized I was carrying for 2 lifetimes. I was wearing a stunning red trench coat, feeling reborn. As I walked down the marble steps, a hand grabbed my wrist. "Serena, wait." Felix stood there, looking surprisingly haggard despite his bespoke suit. "We were husband and wife for 7 years. Lily is still my daughter. If you ever need anything, if you're struggling, you can always come to me." "She won't need you." A sharp voice cut through the air. Julian materialized from the crowd, holding Lily's hand. He stepped between Felix and me, firmly removing Felix's grip from my wrist. With a swift possessive motion, Julian pulled me flush against his chest. Lily covered her eyes with her hands, but peeked through her fingers, giggling softly. Felix's eyes darkened with a turbulent mix of jealousy and regret. "This is a private family matter, Julian." "Back off." "Family matter," Julian scoffed, his eyes flashing with a dangerous protective fury. "You abandoned your traumatized wife and child to go on a 3-month sex vacation with your high school crush. You ignored them when they were in the hospital. If that's how you treat your family, then I have zero respect for you as a man." Felix's jaw clenched. "You son of a b." Before Felix could finish the sentence, Julian's fist connected with a sickening crunch against Felix's jaw. Felix stumbled back, stunned, before roaring in anger and tackling Julian to the pavement. "Are you out of your mind? Why would you brawl on the steps of a courthouse?" I dabbed a cotton swab soaked in antiseptic onto the cut above Julian's eyebrow, scolding him mercilessly. The fight had been brutal. Both men had trained in boxing at their Ivy League country clubs, and it showed. By the time the court bailiffs pulled them apart, they were both bloodied and bruised. I had to bail Julian out of a temporary holding cell, while Felix was escorted away by his frantic lawyers. We were now sitting in my kitchen. Julian's lip was busted. His cheekbone was bruised purple, and his knuckles were scraped raw. But despite looking like he'd been thrown from a moving train, he was smiling. "I couldn't stand watching him touch you," Julian said simply, wincing slightly as I pressed down on a cut. "Even if you couldn't stand it, throwing a punch in public is idiotic," I chided, my heart fluttering nervously. "Are you feeling sorry for him?" Julian asked, his smile faltering, a flicker of genuine insecurity crossing his eyes. I pressed the cotton swab a little harder, making him hiss in pain. "I'm just saying it is not worth dirtying your hands for a piece of trash." Julian's smile returned, softer this time. He reached up and gently wrapped his large warm hand around my wrist, stopping my movements. For you, Serena, it is always worth it. The cotton swab slipped from my fingers, hitting the floor with a soft tap. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt incredibly thin. The comfortable, teasing banter we usually relied on evaporated, leaving behind a heavy, undeniable tension. Julian didn't look away. He pulled my hand down, holding it against his chest, right over his beating heart. His amber eyes were dark, stripped of all their usual playful armor. "You know exactly how I feel about you, don't you, Serena?" he asked. His voice a low, gravelly whisper. Did I know? Maybe I did. But knowing and accepting were two entirely different things. I pulled my hand back gently, stepping away from the counter, wrapping my arms around myself defensively. "Julian, I just got out of a 10-year relationship that ended in betrayal. I spent a decade proving to myself that I was blind, that I chose the wrong man. I am a divorced mother with a child who is my entire universe. I can't just jump into something else. Do you understand?" I thought my rejection would make him back down, preserve his pride and retreat. But Julian stood up, closing the distance between us until I had to look up to meet his gaze. "Divorced? So what? A mother? I love Lily as much as I love you. Felix, being a blind, cheating fool doesn't decrease your value. Serena, it just proves he didn't deserve you. I have waited for you since we were teenagers. No one will ever make you or Lily feel second best ever again. I swear it on my life. So do you understand me?" I didn't give him an answer that night. I couldn't. I fled the kitchen like a coward, locking myself in my bedroom, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might trigger another medical episode. Julian, sensing my overwhelming panic, didn't push. The next morning, he left a note on the counter, saying he had to fly to London to handle a crisis at his European headquarters. He would be gone for a few months. He was giving me space to breathe, to heal, and to realize what my life looked like without him in it. Without Julian's constant presence, the house felt too quiet, too large. Lily moped around, rushing to the iPad after school every day to FaceTime him, eagerly recounting every tiny detail of her kindergarten life. Julian always listened with rapt attention, never once rushing her off the phone, despite the time zone difference and his grueling schedule. Meanwhile, Felix officially announced his relationship with Clara. They paraded their rekindled true love across every social media platform and high society gala. Clara, perhaps feeling insecure about her status as the woman who broke up a marriage, began aggressively DMing me from burner accounts. She sent photos of them together, accompanied by vitriolic warnings. "Felix is my soulmate. Even though you share a kid, keep your distance. Don't try to play the victim and crawl back." I laughed out loud in my empty kitchen and typed back a single reply. "Glad to see you finally admit that being a homewrecker is something to be insecure about." She blocked me immediately. Through mutual friends, I heard the cracks were already showing. Felix was used to a wife who managed his life seamlessly. Clara was an artist who needed constant emotional validation. They fought constantly over trivial things, their grand romance suffocating under the weight of everyday reality. But I didn't care. I was too busy staring at my phone, wondering what time it was in London, and if it was too late to call Julian. 3 months later, I took Lily to Saks Fifth Avenue to buy a dress for her upcoming piano recital. She had saved up her own allowance and insisted on buying a welcome home present for Julian, who was returning to New York that weekend. We were browsing the luxury children's boutique when I heard a familiar, shrill voice echoing from the adjacent aisle. "Felix, are you out of your mind? We are shopping for my gallery opening, and you're looking at children's clothes." I peeked through the racks. Clara was standing there, her face contorted in anger, snatching a beautiful velvet dress out of Felix's hands and throwing it onto a display table. Felix looked exhausted. The romantic glow of his European getaway completely vanished. He glared at Clara, his voice dripping with impatience. "We are divorced, Clara. But Lily is still my daughter. You were the one who insisted we be together. The least I can do is buy my child a dress. Stop being so incredibly selfish." Clara let out a bitter, hysterical laugh. "Selfish? I abandoned my life in Paris because you flew across the world, begging me telling me I was the only woman you ever loved. I took the label of a homewrecker for you, and the moment you finally get your divorce, you spend every night staring at photos of Serena and Lily in your study. What am I to you? A trophy you wanted but don't actually want to keep. Shoppers were beginning to stare, whispering behind their hands. Felix, a man who valued his public image above all else, grabbed Clara's arm, trying to drag her out of the store. Keep your voice down. You're making a scene. Tell me the truth. Clara screamed, ripping her arm away. Do you want to marry me, or are you regretting the divorce? Do you want to go crawling back to Serena to give your precious daughter a complete home? I told you 1,000 times, Serena and I are finished. But Lily is my flesh and blood. Why are you forcing me to choose? Why are you being so unreasonable? Felix yelled back, finally losing control. The argument culminated in Clara raising her hand and slapping Felix hard across the face in front of dozens of onlookers. Felix stood frozen, his cheek red, humiliation burning in his eyes. He turned to storm out of the boutique, and as he rounded the corner, he locked eyes with me. He froze, the shame washing over him like a tidal wave. We didn't exchange a single word. He broke eye contact and practically fled the store. Mommy, look! Lily tugged at my sleeve. I turned around and saw Julian walking toward us, fresh off a transatlantic flight, holding a massive bouquet of lilies. He had gone straight from JFK to the mall to find us. He bought Lily 5 different dresses, not letting her spend a dime of her allowance. That night, after Julian dropped us off, I found Felix sitting on the steps of my brownstone. He reeked of expensive scotch, his tie undone, the red slap mark still faintly visible on his cheek. What do you want, Felix? I asked, my voice devoid of any warmth. He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot and filled with a pathetic, drunken sorrow. When I used to come home drunk from corporate dinners, you always had hot tea waiting for me. You never looked at me with eyes so cold. And you proved that my devotion was a complete waste of time, I replied, unlocking the front door. He reached out, bracing his hand against the doorframe, desperate. Serena, if I hadn't signed those papers, if I had just stayed, would we still be a happy family? There are no ifs in life, Felix. You are who you are. Even if you had 100 lifetimes, you would always choose your own selfish desires. Don't humiliate yourself further. Leave. I pushed his hand away and slammed the door in his face. An hour later, Lily woke up screaming. She was burning up with a sudden terrifying viral fever, her small body convulsing. Panic seized my throat. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook so badly. I dropped my car keys. As I carried her out the front door, Julian was pulling into the driveway. He had driven back just to check on us. He took one look at my panicked face, scooped Lily into his arms, and put her in the back seat. I've got you, Serena, breathe. She is going to be fine. I'm right here. He drove like a madman to the ER, his presence a steady, unbreakable anchor in my storm of terror. He stayed awake the entire night, holding Lily's hand, bringing me coffee, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. When the sun came up, and the doctor assured us the fever had broken, Julian slumped into the chair next to me, exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. I looked at him, this man who had loved me from the shadows, who protected my daughter as his own, who never once made me feel like I was a burden. Julian, I whispered, my voice trembling but certain. He looked up. Let's try. Let's get married. A month later, Felix and Clara's disastrous shotgun marriage ended in a highly publicized vicious divorce. Clara, driven entirely mad by jealousy and bitterness, crashed my wedding. Wearing a white dress, she stormed the bridal suite, screaming that I was the reason her life was ruined. Julian shielded me, signaling security, while Felix, who had arrived uninvited to stand in the back of the church, dragged her out. You ruined your own life by being a homewrecker, I yelled after her. You deserve every bit of this misery. Felix looked back at me one last time, in my wedding gown, looking radiant and whole. If I asked you to run away with me right now, would you? He whispered, delusional to the very end. You made me sick in the last life, Felix. I whispered back, letting him know I remembered everything. In this life you're just pathetic. His eyes widened in sheer, unadulterated horror as the realization hit him. I turned my back on him forever. Outside the venue, Felix and Clara continued their vicious screaming match. In their blind rage, they stumbled off the curb into oncoming traffic. I didn't see it happen. I was already walking down the aisle toward the man who truly loved me. Wei Shun, Lily's POV. If I told you I was reborn, just like a character in a movie, would you believe me? That high fever unlocked all my memories. I am 6 years old, but I remember living until I was 16. I remember the man with the baseball cap successfully dragging me away. I remember being sold to a family who wanted a child, only for them to get pregnant and throw me out on the streets. I remember the beatings. I remember being sold again and again. I remember the dark rooms, the cold floors, the unspeakable things they made me do. In my past life, when I was 14, I saw my father on the street. I ran to him, grabbing his expensive suit, trying to scream through a throat ruined by abuse. He kicked me away. He said I was dirtying the suit Clara had bought him. He didn't even look at my face. I died at 16, bleeding out in a filthy cabin in the mountains, sold to a man 4 times my age. When I woke up in this life, safe in my mother's arms, I cried for hours. I knew my mother never stopped loving me. I knew my father never did. But then, Uncle Julian came. He looks at my mommy like she is the only star in the sky. He holds my hand when I cross the street. He doesn't buy me cheap airport toys. He builds greenhouses with me. My real father was a monster who let me die in the dark. But Julian is the dad who brought me into the light. I hold mommy's hand as we walk down the aisle. She looks like a princess. Julian is waiting at the end, crying like a big baby. I smile, knowing that this time, in this life, we are finally going to be happy.
That's all for today. I'm Lina. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories every week. Thanks for watching.